good to be home in Texas.
Right.
So, it's we left and for this district work period, and then Justice Scalia passed. That's going to be a dramatically different dynamic going forward than we anticipated. We had McConnell has a deal with Harry Reid that he won't screw up the appropriations process this year. Harry's last year in office, he's an old appropriator, and so he's agreed to not filibuster getting on the bills. He reserves the right to filibuster to get off the bill, but at least get the bills on the Senate floor and have that conversation. I don't know what this dynamic of...
Now, this was before the death?
Yeah, this was in December,
okay,
November.
Yes, okay.
In December, part of the omnibus bill agreed that we would run the 2017 budget appropriation work on a more regular order basis. And so, I don't know that you can trust Harry Reid anyway, but now then, with this new dynamic in the Senate where the president wants a nominee and the senators are going to be banging on a hearing and all this kind of stuff, I don't know what that would do to the appropriations process that we thought we were going to have. So you can't judge that till we get back. I know the Republicans are pretty much lined up to say that they're not going to confirm.
That's all we hear.
Exactly, and I agree with those who say, particularly Tad, that say this ought to be a referendum on who should do the nomination process. In other words, let the American people have a voice. It's pretty rare that you have this circumstance where you can say, all right, let's make this election about, in addition to all the other important things that are involved,
right,
let's make this about the nominating process for
and I think, wasn't it yesterday that he quoted the Constitution on will appoint, and I didn't even know he knew there was a Constitution.
Well, he doesn't act like it, does he? He doesn't act like it. Certainly the president, I don't begrudge his wanting to appoint somebody. These are signature events in any president's career, is the nomination of a Supreme Court judge. That's kind of a statement as to who they are and what. So his ego is not going to allow him to nominate somebody that's going to be acceptable to Republicans. I mean, it's just not going to happen. So he's going to nominate someone that's more.
You got a guess?
I don't. There's a lot of things go into that. There's a lot of names being thrown around that I think are not particularly viable people, but there are a couple there that are coming off of circuit courts that have a history of being a justice and that kind of thing, and so I think that's important. But he's not going to nominate someone that's acceptable to the Republicans, and so that sets up the fight.
So you think it'll just go into a wait and see situation with the Republicans? With the Senate, they'll just sit on it?
The dynamic there, HV, is that there are 24 Republicans up for election in the Senate. So we're defending a lot of seats, and there are people who are in tough states, Ohio, New Hampshire, and other places, and so they're going to be getting some pressure from their Democrat voters to push McConnell to a vote, that kind of thing. So far, the ones that are in the most vulnerable positions, Rob Portman, Kelly Ayotte, and others, have said no vote. We're not going to vote on this deal. It ought to be a November type deal, and then we'll see. So we'll see how that plays out as the summer progresses. I think it'll take President Obama a while to get it done. The one other aspect of that is that at the Republican debate Saturday night, I thought that was particularly disrespectful of Justice Scalia's 30 years of service to our country by even bringing it up.
Oh.
I wished our folks would have said that's inappropriate, it's rude, it's disrespectful, it's hurtful to his family. This man spent 30 years on the bench, has done wonderful things for this country, depending on your perspective.
Right.
We owe his family the mourning period. It's just in bad taste. It's unseemly. I'm not going to answer that question. And
that would have been.
Oh man, the crowd would have come out of their chairs screaming and hollering because that was the right thing.
Yeah.
The guy was hardly dead. He'd been dead less than 24 hours, and they're already talking about. It's just anyway. You know what I'm talking about. So I wish that I'm a little disappointed in our candidates that they.
Well, I now read that the
position.
president is not going to the funeral.
Exactly. More disrespect. More disrespect.
No.
Exactly.
Well, I'm going to play the devil's advocate.
That's a role you play well. You get a lot of practice at it, buddy.
Thank you. Congress gets a lot of bad press. Coffee shop talk.
Sure.
You're blamed, the Congress is blamed for just not doing anything. I know you have a committee. You're a hard worker. You're from Texas. But what are you doing to improve the image of Congress, of the House of Representatives?
Sure. Well,
You hear me?
I absolutely, absolutely. It hurts me to have the institution that is so important to our country, a
That's it.
to be
You
denigrated,
represent us.
to be exactly to be denigrated, to have the kind of, you know, you separate the people, the 435 of us who are there, because they're very reflective of our country, and we've got pretty broad spread. But the institution itself is a worthy institution. It ought to be something anybody would aspire to do, to be a part of that body. And I'm proud to be a part of the body of the House. Not so much proud of some of the stuff we do, perhaps, but I'm proud of the institution. And so we need to kind of look at it in two different veins. One is the institution, and it's one of the keystones, one of the cornerstones of our democracy. Our representative republic is the House of Representatives. You can become president of the United States without being elected.
Yes.
You cannot get into the House of Representatives without being elected.
Chosen by the people
Exactly.
in your
So,
district.
what I'm doing is working as hard as I can to do my role as a representative. That's why I'm out and about all the time, doing all these meetings, talking to people, doing the kind of thing that I
Listening.
Listening, paying
There you
attention. Making sure that I try to conduct myself in a way that is exemplary, that I bring honor to the institution, that I don't do something from a personal standpoint that brings dishonor to the institution itself. Now, the overall morass that we find ourselves in, this is a divided country. We've got divided government, White House in a legislative body controlled by different folks. The country itself is divided. Much of that is
The population is divided.
Yeah, exactly. Much of that is promoted divisiveness, in that we work, you know, the news media, the TV outlets, the cable TV, talk radio, work at dividing our country. And so when you get that circumstance, then you'll have this malaise that we find ourselves in, that you know, we got a 19% approval rating. Quite frankly, HV, I don't know who's in that 19%.
Good.
Well, I mean, I'm not satisfied with what's going on at all. And so one of the
Is there one thing that could jar this country back to where it needs to be?
Yes, and unfortunately, it's
Tell me what it is.
a tragedy of some scale like 9/11. That's what
That did it, yeah.
Yes, it did. And so none of us
Didn't
want
last, but
none of us want that. So we're adults, thinking adults. We ought to be able to reset this. Now, what we're doing in the House between now and June 1st, under our new leader, Paul Ryan, he's out and about making the case for.
are you happy with him?
I am. He's doing a great job. Even though I had said I would do it if he didn't, or try to do that job, he's the right guy. So you see him on talk radio, you see him on TV, you see him out and about making our case. What he wants to promote over the next between now and June 1st is to put together that agenda that we can argue to the American people that if you'll put a Republican in the White House, leave the House and Senate in control by Republicans, these are the things we can do. For 7 years, Republicans have been against everything going on. And it's hard to be positive when you're against stuff. We need to be for something. And you create an energy when you're for things. So this is that body of four that we're going to be. It's in regulatory reform, it's in poverty and upward mobility, it's in health care, it's in reclaiming Article 1 responsive authorities away from the executive branch. 5 areas that Paul wants to put together. He's asked the committee chairman of jurisdiction to lead that effort, to reach out to the rest of the conference, to get those ideas percolating from the bottom up, that we can put out as an agenda project. We need a better name for it, but so that when we settle on a nominee for president, that nominee can take a look at that and say, I agree with most of that, and I'll run on that kind of a program, so that then in create kind of a momentum or a mandate election. Think back to 1980. Reagan came out of the nomination process with a rebuild the military mantra. The House of Representatives put together an economic package that he picked up, and together the election was a mandate. And then in '81, Reagan and the Congress, White House, began putting that thing together. So and created that Reagan Revolution. It was in divided government, but nevertheless created that kind of.
It was really divided.
It was. It was. I mean, coming into Carter years were just as divisive as the Obama years. We just had more of the Obama years.
Thank goodness.
Exactly. So it's a volume thing, and that's the other deal. We've been you and I live in the most conservative district in the United, all 435. We're the most conservative by several measures.
Thank you very much.
And we hang out with folks who are like us, and we talk to folks that are like us, and we see things that people in other districts think are the right answer, that we know is wrong. And so we get this disconnect in that we don't understand why the rest of the 434 don't think like we do, and why we can't move an agenda that would move if District 11 was in charge of making all that happen.
Yeah.
But there are legitimate representatives up there who are representing their constituents, and their constituents have a much different worldview, life view, than you and I do. And that's how our system works. And so when you have that kind of tension going on, and you have a leader that the folks in our district don't like and don't respect, then you set yourself up for a really poor approval ratings if you're part of that institution.
And it has happened.
Sure it has. But this isn't, this is ours, and so we think it's the worst ever.
Yeah.
And I suspect if you go back into history that there are other periods in our nation's history where times have been tough. We're not in a civil war, we're not in World War II, we're not in some of those other.
What about immigration? We've got to hit that.
We do.
Did it fall in any of those four?
Not directly. 5. This president's not going to do anything that we like. Now we owe a plan to show here's what we would do if we could get in position. The normal legislative process is developing that. Mike McCall, Chairman of Homeland Security, put together a bill a year ago, January, to secure the border. Now that's all he has jurisdiction over. He doesn't have jurisdiction over internal enforcement. He doesn't have jurisdiction over immigration policy, but just border security. So he went to each sector of the southern border, all the way from Brownsville to San Diego, and said, all right, for this sector, what do you need? How many people, how many airplanes, helicopters, cameras, sensors, what do you need? Did that all the way out there, and then put that into a package and said, that's going to be our border security bill, and we're going to move that one forward. Well, it didn't include all the other things because he didn't have jurisdiction over those, and some Senate Republicans wanted a comprehensive bill. So we've not been able to bring that border security bill forward on the time frame that we wanted to show them.
Is it still viable?
Oh yeah, no, it's available to go. I mean, it's out of his committee. It's ready to go right now. Bob Goodlatte, chairman of the Judiciary Committee, who does have jurisdiction over all the other stuff, is putting together individual bills to bring forward so that we'll schedule those toward the floor at a similar time, so that the Senate can't complain that we're not solving enough of the problems. Now, the problem we have is between now and the end of September, when we break for the elections, we want to do all 12 appropriations bills, and that's a lot of floor time. So there's not going to be a lot of floor time for other things, but anyway, we'll see how that mirrors together as we go forward. But yeah, we've got a solution from a legislative standpoint. It's not comprehensive in the sense that we don't want it all in one bill. We want America to be able to see the border security bill, to see the visa bill, to see the guest worker bill, to see this kind of stuff, that they'd be able to do it. And we just believe that's a better mechanical way to go at it than trying to put it all in one bill. Comprehensive solutions generally don't work well. Comprehensive health care was Obamacare. Comprehensive financial reform was Dodd-Frank. So we want to stay away from that. And it may get added together at the end of the process, but we want to move across the floor in relatively manageable chunks of the program, so that you don't have the kind of
people can see exactly,
and they can read it for themselves.
Can the Obama bill, health bill, be removed?
Yes.
You think it will be?
We did it. We tried in January, as you know.
Yes.
We put a bill on the president's desk that defunded Planned Parenthood and gutted Obamacare. Eliminated all the taxes and set the penalties at zero. It basically neutered Obamacare. He vetoed it.
Sure.
So we can work that same process where it only takes 51 votes in the Senate, called reconciliation, to get that to a Republican president's desk. So there is a path.
So
there's a path
to get the next administration.
That's right.
Okay.
That's right.
That's good.
So we've got that one tool now. It can't get at all of Obamacare, but once you've gutted it that way, then the rest of it falls apart, and we'll be able to do it. Now, what we owe the American people is not a replacement per se, but what would we do differently? A replacement argues that there is, in fact, a national solution to this healthcare wreck.
Have you heard it? Do you know it?
There's not one. There's not a national solution.
Okay.
And so when we use the word replace, that conjures up in people's mind that we've got a that's wrong. We've got some things we would do differently, selling insurance across state lines, association health plans.
As a part of the existing bill.
No.
Well,
it's part of the solution toward a better way. But at the end of the day, here's the rub. We have infinite demand for health care. There is no top on the health care for everybody, and finite resources. And so who's going to do the reconciliation between infinite demand and finite resources? Do you want a government doing it as they do in single-payer systems in Europe and Canada? Or do you want caregivers and families making those hard decisions? Well, I prefer to have families and caregivers making those hard decisions than some government entity deciding how we're going to reconcile between those two issues. And then that's the broad decision.
But
and
what does that do to the pay side? What do the people?
The pay side is the finite resources, and those are hard decisions. End of life care and all those kind of things that needs to be in the families and caregivers. And then there's a role for insurance, but insurance is not a panacea, because insurance is just a deal that the three of us are going to put up money in a bucket to insure against a particular risk, assuming only one of us will have it. There'll be enough money there that the other two don't need. Well, that doesn't. If we all three have the issue, then there's not enough money in the bucket. And so insurance per se is not a way to fix it. It's how much money should we spend on your body or my body over a lifetime on health care, and who's going to pay for that, and how does that get paid, all those kind of things. So these are hard decisions that the conversation that's been going on heretofore is really not worthy of the gravity of what we need to come to grips with on health care.
The machinery for that come out of the House.
In all likelihood. And that's, healthcare is, I think, is one of those legs that of the five buckets, so to speak, will be that if you put Republicans in charge, here's what we would do. And I try not to use the word replace Obamacare, but here's what we would do differently than Obamacare, and it's and a part of that has got to be entitlement reform with respect to Medicare. We can't afford the current Medicare promise for everybody. It's just, the mechanics don't work. So what we have to do is be very blunt with people and say, all right, these two guys here, you and I are good, but these two guys will, as an adult, as a senior adult, pay a greater proportion of their own health care costs than their parents and grandparents did. And it's unfair, I got all that. But that's the reality. And the sooner we face the reality, the sooner these two guys begin to make the adjustments to however they're going to handle their retirement to reflect the fact that they're going to be more responsible for their own health care costs than previous generations. And the quicker we do that, the greater lead time they have to accumulate the resources necessary to take, to look at that. But they would know it ahead of time. Social Security is a good example. Last time they changed Social Security was 1983 in any meaningful way. They raised my retirement age from 65 to 66. I didn't have a clue. Back in 1983, I wasn't thinking about retiring. I wasn't thinking about Social Security. And so as a consequence, I'm now there, and it's like, oh, okay, no big deal. So because I had 30 years to understand the impact. So the quicker we make these decisions, then the longer lead time, the less immediate the change has to be, the longer folks have to adjust to whatever that new reality is. And we're not that will be a part of the conversation as well. We Republicans have a plan to renegotiate, not reform. Reform is a warm, fuzzy, cuddly word where everybody wins. This is renegotiation, and those are hard. We've got a renegotiation plan that says, here's how we'll do it. Now, I don't know if it's the best plan, but it's our plan. The president won't put a plan up. If there's a better way to do it, to face that reality about changing or renegotiating Medicare for these, great, let's have that conversation. If there's some ways to adjust and make the plan we've got on the table better, great, let's have that conversation. But we can't get the other side to engage in the most fundamental conversation that we must renegotiate Medicare. It's a promise we all want to leave in place, certainly for the folks that are near-term beneficiaries and already on it, but we also ought to have that promise for future generations as well, but it's going to have to be a different promise. and we can't get the president. We
It's a
can't get
gigantic problem.
it is.
Yeah.
And we can't
Where are you on the military, rebuilding our military strength?
Under President Obama's vision, we'll push the Army down to smaller than before World War II, the Navy coming out of World War I, and the Air Force will have never been that small. This world is not safer. And the world is also calmer, maybe not safer, but calmer when America is at her strongest. When she's got the strength out there. I worry about Putin and Kim Jong-un and the folks in China making miscalculations as to what we might or might not do because they see where our military is right now.
See how weak we are.
That's right, and they may want to think they can take advantage of that and make a decision they wouldn't otherwise make. If we'd had a strong military, one that's capable of defending our interests and our allies and ourselves, then they may be less likely to make a decision that would start something none of us want to get started. So, resetting the military, it's about funding.
Is that coming out of the House?
Well, both houses and the Senate. Spending bills. You hear this power of the purse. Power of the purse is two things: spending bills, which can start in either house, and we restrict what the executive branch can spend. Tax bills only start in the House. Our only sole jurisdiction is tax bills. The raising of the money starts in the House. The spending of the money can come out of either house. Yeah. So anyway, that's where it is. We think that $610 billion for this next year, 2017, is the floor. It's probably about $18 billion less than is really necessary to keep us kind of in the fight. But that decision is yet to be made, and that'll be one of the things that we'll have a pretty lengthy conversation over the next 2 or 3 weeks as we build the budget for 2017. We need to get that work done in the next 2 weeks. It'll be in the Budget Committee next week and then on the floor the following week. The Senate needs to get it done because that then allows us to start that appropriations process. And for the first time since 1994, we are going to work hard to get all 12 of the individual pieces of the appropriations bill across the House floor. And that takes a lot.
Does that include the VA
yes.
rebuild?
Yeah, VA Milcon, Ag, Department of Defense, Foreign Affairs, Criminal Science Justice. There are 12 individual subcommittees under approach, big umbrella, and each one of those has a bill of their jurisdiction, and VA Milcon is one of those.
What is your personal bills?
I'm responsible for the Ag Committee right now and the work that we're doing there. So we're doing a 2-year deep dive in SNAP, the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. Food
Deep
stamps.
Dive.
We are looking at it from soup to nuts. We're trying to figure out what's working, what's not working, where are the social hazards, where does it need to be improved, and those kind of things. It's a program that most would argue will be there, but we need to improve it. So we're working at that. We have responsibility over the Commodity Future Trading Commission. We have that reauthorization done last year through the House, but we're waiting on the Senate to get it done, so then we'll come back together and make that happen. The most immediate thing will be the way we label, whether or not you label food that's been bioengineered or has biotechnology associated with it. And that's got to get done before July.
Do you expect that to be required?
We do not want it required. We don't want a mandatory label. Voluntary label. But we also...
It's a big thing nationwide.
People need to know what it is. But it's not a food safety issue. In spite of those zealots on the other side arguing that it is, there is zero evidence. Zero evidence. The trillions of meals that have been eaten in the last 10,000 years. We've been bioengineering for 10,000 years. If you crossbreed an Angus with a Hereford, that's bioengineering.
Yeah, it is.
You're working.
Yeah.
If you graft one plant onto another plant, that's bioengineering. So we could just do it quicker these days than used to. And so setting up a national standard, preempting the states from setting their standards, is we need to get that done before July 1st. And the reason for that is that Vermont came up with its own labeling program. And they set the standard for what is and isn't bioengineering. I don't know if it's right or not, but they set theirs. Starting July 1st, if you have there's a penalty associated with a mislabeled product in their state. So let's just say I'm a green bean canner, and I can some green beans, and I've got that label done properly for the rest of the United States, and I ship it to New Hampshire. My distributor inadvertently ships it into Vermont. 24-pack of green beans case, $1,000 a day per item. Penalty. And there's a vigilante system, a bounty system in place for shoppers and
Reporting.
consumers to go in and find them. So, and that's not on the distributor. That comes back on me, the manufacturer. So that's an interstate commerce issue, and so those are some of the areas that we're working on, as well as we're trying to work with the secretary on redesignate or to designate cottonseed as an other oil seed. Our cotton guys, production agriculture in general, has got a 55% drop in farm income the last 3 years. The third worst drop since we've been keeping these records. And so working with, and cotton has been particularly hard hit because of the way that the safety net is structured right now for cotton. So we're trying to work with the secretary.
Well, what is the future for cotton in Texas?
Well, if we can't get these guys some help, there'll be a lot fewer cotton farmers in the near term because they've had a tough year. They don't have much of a safety net, and so many of them will go out of business. And whether it's the guy that owns the land is trying to farm cotton, or the folks who own the land, they've got a tenant farmer on there. The tenant can't do it and can't farm it. Much of what we have out here is dry land. It's not suitable for other crops.
Yeah.
In many instances, and so it's a ripple effect, and we're working hard to try to keep those guys in the.
I know you're on a time frame, so I'm going to ask you one hard question. Term limits.
Right.
Where do you stand on that? How many years you've been there, and what's your feeling?
Yeah, my feeling is that I'm against term limits.
Why?
Well, they work against the system. By that, I've got term limits right now. Every 2 years, I raise my hand and I've got a job interview. And so the voters decide. Typically, term limits are supported by people who are okay with their own member of Congress, but they don't like somebody else's member of Congress. and there are poster children for why you would have term limits. There are folks that have been there way too long. They're not in leadership any longer. They're not part of the solutions. They're just up there. And so my commitment to the folks in District 11 is, as long as I'm moving up in leadership, as long as I'm getting additional responsibility, I'm staying. Once I get to a position where I'm just there, I'm coming home, and I'm going to let somebody else do it.
What do you see your future?
Here's why term limits are not a good idea. You've got executive branch bureaucracies that are in the main of one party. You have a leadership level that comes and goes with the president. And they're currently Democrats. They're masters at passive-aggressive conduct. And here's what I mean. I've been on a multi-year quest to force the Department of Defense to audit their books and records. The Pentagon cannot audit its books and records. And so that's been one of my quests. They know that if I have a term limit, in the sense that I'm only going to be a set amount of time, they can slow play this thing until I'm gone, and that it's not likely somebody else will pick up the deal, right? And so if you want to fully empower the bureaucracy, if you want the folks at the EPA fully in charge, then make sure your executive branch folks are neophytes all the time. Now, the Republicans, we've had dramatic turnover in the House, and so that churn goes on all the time. And typically term limits are pointed at the John Dingles or the Conyers or folks who've been there a zillion years, and I got that. Those are hard to argue about. But to tell me, or to tell voters, hey, Conaway's been doing a good job, and we would like to send him back, but some other people decided against what we wanted to do. I mean, John Conyers is getting elected by the people he represents for decades, and so doing something they like, and that's the definition. If I'm doing things you like, you should be able to vote for me. If I'm doing stuff you don't like, then vote me out, and that happens at in every cycle. So it sounds good. If you look at California and other places that put in term limits, it doesn't work well. Those bureaucracies continue to get stronger and stronger. The representatives get weaker and weaker as you churn them out all the time.